This episode is brought to you by Lumina Growth Lab. At Lumina, we help professional learning and development companies who are struggling with predictable lead flow, a sniper approach to attracting the ideal clients, and a system that qualifies leads so they can have a smoother sales process, finally have scalability, and ultimately take their business to the next level. Most of the time, our clients come to us frustrated because nothing seems to work outside of word of mouth and referral based lead generation. But with the right strategy and support, they're able to confidently add new channels of lead generation, leading to a packed pipeline that creates sustainable revenue and year over year growth for cheaper than ever before because of the use of AI technologies. If that sounds like you or someone you know, connect with me on LinkedIn and I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about unlocking your business's potential. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the Marketing Matrix, everyone. I'm your host, Lisanne Murphy, and today I am joined by the incredible, talented, and ambitious Sarah Gallagher. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
I am thrilled to be here.
Guys, I am so excited for you to get to know this woman and her amazing story and really what she's been able to accomplish despite a lot of adversity. And so let me take a moment to introduce this powerhouse woman, and then I'm really excited to dive into our conversation today. So Sarah Gallagher is the president of the Persimmon Group and creator of Big Dumb Questions newsletter on LinkedIn. Sarah is an expert in executive leadership, agility, and strategy execution, helping leaders get strategy off PowerPoint and into the real world. As a speaker, consultant, and coach, she works with organizations of all sizes, from Fortune 500 companies to fast-moving startups, to unstick clogged project pipelines and turn big ideas into real progress. Okay, I am just so excited for this conversation, guys. So wherever you're at, give Sarah a big round of applause and buckle up. It's going to be a good one. So, Sarah, for our guests that don't know who you are, give us a little
Yeah.
bit of a background in terms of what how did you become the president of the Persimmon Group? I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
where I want to
So
start.
I will say it's kind of a series of accidents, right? So my major was Middle Eastern Studies and Arabic, go figure. So my road to project management, which is how I started my career itself, was kind of a big leap. But then I fell in love with it. It fit I don't know, my sort of natural strengths. And as I grew in that profession and got handed these big projects that were frankly way above what I had any earned competency to execute, but that's why I grew so fast, was because I was doing all these things that were just a notch above what I'd ever done before, over and over again. I finally got hooked in, gosh, it would be 13 years ago now, to the Persimmon Group. Joined as a kind of like a mid to experienced project manager to start. Quickly moved into consulting in project management, which looked like, anything from, hey, we have a multi-billion-dollar project that went off the rails. Can you come in, meet with everybody, tell us what we did wrong and how to fix it? To, hey, we're an IT shop and we're trying to change the way we develop software to be more agile. Help us with that. So all kinds of different things. And so I did that and got to study and learn under some amazing thinkers and consultants. And then, 2 years before the pandemic, took my first executive role at the Persimmon Group. And then in 2020, this would have been February 28th, 2020, I became president of the Persimmon Group. And, 2 weeks later, like I remember it like it was yesterday, it was like March 13th or something. We brought everyone virtual, like many companies. We stayed that way for almost 18 months. So we had to reinvent literally everything about how we delivered business, what clients we went after, how we marketed ourselves. And meanwhile, just navigating scared employees. I was scared. We put ourselves back there. Like now we can kind of contextualize everything, but we didn't know. Like, do you remember when people were like washing their groceries and washing their mail and like, no, I mean, that was just a scary time, period. But then, there wasn't a day I didn't feel like I was way over my head just being a new chief exec in that world.
Yeah, I think yeah, when you told me that story, I was like, are you like the amount of pressure? And like you say, like, you take me right back. Like I remember going to the grocery store and immediately taking off my clothes and putting them in the or not in the dishwasher, in the washing machine, and then taking a shower
Yes.
before, like, coming back to life because who knows what we picked up in the grocery store, right? Like,
Yes.
so much fear, and so, and just the whole economy and operations of, like, how the world worked, like,
Yeah.
changed overnight,
It
basically, and
was
so
hard, and I'll tell you what, like, putting myself back there too, I might be diving into this a little too early, but, 2 things were going on with me personally that on their own would have made those the hardest years of my life to date. One of them was directly tied to the pandemic. So my daughter was she would have been 6 at the time. 3 years before that, she had had a significant lung abscess that had her on a ventilator for 4 days, and a doctor telling us it's a 50-50 shot. She was in an induced coma. Scariest moment as a mother in my life. And she managed to get through it with both lungs, which was, I mean, our best case scenario was she was gonna come out with, you know, with minus a lung. But, when COVID happened and people were talking about it being a respiratory illness, and, we didn't know early on that it wasn't gonna affect kids at the same rate. So I was living in sheer terror that my kid was gonna be susceptible to this, and then having to make as objective decisions as I can about whether everybody should be home and whether I should be calling clients to tell them that my employees need to be home, or am I overreacting? So that was just on that note alone, it was rough.
yeah, yeah, just super, super unprecedented. But how did that set the stage for how, tough decisions, like, now? Do you feel like it kinda, like, battle tested you early, like baptism by fire type situation? Or is it just, like, every situation is unique, every fire is unique? Like, how
It's
did
so
that
funny that you asked that because I was having coffee with a friend yesterday, and she asked me the same thing. She goes, when I first met you," so she met me about a year before the pandemic hit. She goes, "You were stressed out all the time before the pandemic even happened." She's like, "You just worried about work all the time." And she's like, "You seem so relaxed now." And I said, "Yeah, and you know what? It's not that the business doesn't have challenges. I mean, this year with tariffs and all the things, like, it's hard to get people, companies to spend discretionary money right now. So it's not easy. But, I told her, I was like, after the pandemic, nothing really feels like so important or awful that I deserve to carry it home with me. Like, yeah, I had to learn really quick how to separate my worth and value from the outcomes I couldn't control. And that was different. I mean, in a lot of ways, I mean, I could argue that how I got to where I was this obsessive belief that my value was tied to what I could achieve, right? But like, you can't build an entire life around that indefinitely. And I think the pandemic kind of shook me awake and helped me see that and realize you can be really successful a different way.
I love that. I love that. Well, and I think it's amazing, like, how you've been able to put that experience into perspective and let it shift, like, how you show up at home, in the world, and at work, moving forward because of that experience. I think that the pandemic did that for a lot of people, for
It
sure.
did.
But I also think that it's almost like you say, like, looking back, like, it's almost like we were, like, in this dystopian, like, movie, I mean,
Yeah.
and so, like, and it's, like, it's crazy how time and distance creates this, like, "What? Like, was that really the way that it was?"
Do you remember
So
when, like, during all of that, Contagion on Netflix was, like, the top watched movie for a long time?
yeah.
And you're like, "Why? We're living it. Like, why are you doing this to yourself?" But there is some weird quirk in human psychology that just everybody leaned into it?
It's so true. It's so true. Yeah, we were all just so curious. So I'm really fascinated about your journey, like, from, like, being, like, a linguistics human being to
Mhm.
being a consulting human being. Like, do you sometimes, like, look at that past life maybe and be like, "Man, like, what would it have been like to continue down the linguistics path?"
Yeah.
Or do you feel like consulting and leadership training and working in corporations, like, that's always what I was meant for, and I was just doing my best when I picked linguistics or, like, how has linguistics impacted
Yeah,
what
yeah.
you do, like that. I'd really be interested in your thoughts on that
Well,
conversation.
so let's talk about what was happening when I was going to school and I picked that major. It was 2004 when I started college. September 11th had happened on, of course, 2001. And I had grown up in the Midwest, very steeped in a Christian environment. Sudden, awareness that my communities suddenly had about Islam and this part of the world and all of the crazy assumptions that were being made, the emotion that was coming into those conversations. I just had this that I needed to understand this better. Like, I had been so insulated into one way of looking at the world, and the only wanted something that was gonna just not just gently tug me, but wrench me into a new way of looking at things. And at the time and at that age and with what was going on in the world, studying Islam and studying the Middle East felt like that hard right turn I was looking for. What I didn't expect was how much it would open my heart and my intellect and my excitement about the world. I got to study abroad in Cairo for 6 months, and it really it was more than even what I bargained for. And I say all that because in a way, that was my first exposure to consulting because every time I go into a new organization or I just meet a new person, it's a whole culture, right? It's a whole world, often is really unfamiliar with anything I've seen before. And I tell consultants this all the time when they're new. It's like a joke, be prepared to always feel bad at your job because the minute you feel good at your job, you're going to get a brand new client in a new industry with new problems that you haven't seen exactly that way before. And you're going to have a panic moment where you're like, why the heck did they hire me? I don't know what I'm doing. And you have to push through that and lean on what you know, right? So, what I knew was a smattering of Arabic. What I knew was, how to be polite and warm in this different culture. What I knew was a little bit about Islam and Islamic values and how they corresponded to the values I brought to the table. I just relied on those things and an open mind to navigate, Cairo. And I'm doing the same thing today to navigate, you know, a, a big Fortune 500 company or a small startup. They all have similar problems, similar things they want to achieve. But unless you go into it with the sort of, I don't know, beginner's mind, it's really hard to get good at this.
I love that. I love that. Well, I think it's such a good example. I think so many times, especially as women, we just inherently feel, well, I don't have the skills for that. Like I'm underqualified in some way, like way more than our male counterparts typically do, where yeah, I think that stereotypically, men are much more willing to step into situations and positions where they're underqualified, but just like, I'll figure it out. Whereas like women are almost feel like this, like I'm an imposter if I don't know everything that's
Yeah.
necessary for this.
You know
And so I
what's
think it's really cool.
interesting about that,
Yeah,
though?
go ahead.
Because I've given this a lot of I even wrote a newsletter about this recently about why we mistake confidence for competence. And it's because I personally have benefited from that confusion. In other words, unlike most women, I don't think I've ever had a visible confidence problem. I say visible because, of course, I have self-doubt, but I I have never struggled to raise my hand for an assignment. I've never struggled to speak or present in a meeting. I've always, um, I don't know, felt in my soul that I can do something even when there was literally no evidence that I could. I don't know if it was how I was raised. My dad, and now this is probably, I should unpack this in therapy, but he used to always say, you remind me a lot more of a man than a woman. I mean, you're sometimes wrong, but you are never in doubt. So you can unpack that for all the latent sexism there. But at the same time, I, did feel sometimes more similar to the confidence I saw in male circles than women's circles. And here's why that sucked is because women don't like confidence among themselves sometimes, right? Like when I come in swaggering, ready to volunteer for something, I don't feel like I'm in doubt. Lack of humility and sort of collectivism that women are socialized to have, that we value, you know. Sometimes I felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb and was really, maybe not accepted on my own terms. So I mean, I will say I struggled until probably the last 6 or 7 years to feel like as comfortable in a room of women as I did in a room of executive men. Isn't that weird?
That's so fascinating.
Yeah, it's
Super
weird.
fascinating. Yeah, I don't I think it's I think it's cool. I mean, I think it's really unique and like you said, like it just shows like the latent elements of sexism and stereotyping that we even buy into, even
Yeah.
if our personality is not that, right? Like for you to like not
Yeah.
feel as comfortable, it's like, well, because I'm not like you, right? So interesting.
It's so interesting to me because I just have such a conflicted relationship with the discussion around imposter syndrome because I feel it inside. I definitely have a lot of self-doubt, but I don't have a lack of confidence, which I see as 2 different things. Because when it comes down to it, imposter syndrome is not crippling to me. What that means though is that it's not to understand what it might feel like to have it. Do you feel, and maybe this is my own stuff, but do you feel sometimes like it's a badge of honor to say that you have imposter syndrome? And what I mean by that is if you don't, you must be arrogant. I don't know. Sometimes I kind of feel a little bit of that pressure, like, oh, of course I have imposter syndrome. Like it's sometimes I feel like it's almost a membership card that you have to present that says, "Hey, I'm not a jerk, I promise." I was about to say a
Huh,
different
that's really
word, but,
interesting.
like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just
No, I can
digression, but
No, I don't think it's a digression at all. I think it's fascinating. And I think you're right. I think you're onto something. I think that the phrase that came to my mind is, and it's something that I've discussed with one of my friends in my religious circle, is sometimes in order to like be a good Christian, like we
Uh-huh.
have what I like to call displayed humility, right?
Yeah.
Like, you also have to, like display, like, I'm humble and I'm teachable and, and that means that I'm a good Christian. And I think that imposter syndrome, like, in terms of, like, how you're framing it, is, like, the professional equivalence of that. Of that,
Yeah.
like, it's like, in order to, like, show up, like, as a strong but yet empathic and compassionate leader, like, I have to have imposter syndrome to be approachable.
Yeah, and here's why that sucks for feminism, right? Is because if you are pressured by your own by other women not to say that you're good at something and mean it, how are you going to advocate for yourself in male spaces? Like, how are you going to advocate for other women in these places? Like, we are incentivizing each other not to grow in our careers, and it sucks.
Yeah. I know, I totally agree. Well, and here's another, like, frame of it. I think that imposter syndrome is one way of saying I'm scared to be myself in this situation.
Ooh, okay.
It's like it's this fear of, if I'm not if I'm authentic here,
Huh?
then will I not if I'm authentic, will I potentially not be accepted? And
Yeah,
will
okay.
I be rejected and like lose attachment, right? Because like two basic needs that like we have as human beings is like we have like this drive to be ourselves, but we also have this drive for belonging and connection and attachment.
Mm, mm,
And so I think when we're saying we're imposter, it's like I'm afraid to be myself because like what if I'm myself and you reject me? And
okay.
that would hurt, right? And
Yeah.
so it's like it's safer almost to be like, well, yeah, of course I have imposter syndrome. And then someone's like, oh no, you're great. And then you're like, okay, good. I'm liked, you know?
That's true. That is so true. Yeah. Well, I didn't expect to go on this topic, but it's a good one. I mean, I think when you talk about being a woman and growing into leadership, it's really hard to talk about that without talking about that phenomenon.
Yeah. No, totally. I totally agree. I love it. This has been so fun. Okay, so let's talk about the Persimmon Group, right?
Okay, sure.
So first of all, I just have to ask, like, the nature of the name. Like,
Yeah.
is persimmon a is it symbolic in some way? Is it someone's name? Like, I first of all, I love
Yeah.
the name, and I'll tell you why I love the name, but I want to know why first. Like, why the Persimmon Group? How did it get its name?
Yeah, so we are first of all based in Oklahoma, which is a big, Native American. In fact, Tulsa is Native American land where we're based. There's a Native American legend about a persimmon where if you cut it open, depending on the pattern that the seeds make will tell you what kind of winter it's going to be. And so that combined with the fact that the folks who founded the Persimmon Group 20 years ago did it at this place called Post Oak Lodge that has a grove of persimmon trees. So it's kind of dual meaning. But the idea that, having a partner who can help you maybe not predict what's going to happen, but prepare for multiple futures to build resilience now for when you're going to need it later. That's a big part of what we do.
I love that so much. Yeah, I first of all, I think persimmons are kind of a weird fruit, right? I mean,
Oh, they're
not a
disgusting. The one time I've had one was like, "Oh, I hate this."
really? Oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
I probably shouldn't
you
say
haven't
that, but bleh.
man, well, maybe you haven't had it. I mean, I guess everyone said that, "Yo, you haven't had it prepared the right way, or you had it too early." You have to eat them. They're such an amazing fruit, but you have to eat them at
Really?
the right time. If you eat them at the wrong time, they are gross. They
Okay.
have to be almost rotten is, like, the best time to eat them because they're
Well,
very
that sounds
sweet.
appetizing.
I know. Well, kinda like, how, like, you put, like, a super ripe banana to
Uh-huh.
make, like, the best muffin?
Okay.
It's
Alright.
the same way with a
Same
persimmon, like,
concept.
when a persimmon is, you peel it and it's, like, soft, and then you mush it into, like, a bread or as a jam or something. Oh, so good. But anyway, in some of my world travels, one of the things that I had the opportunity to do was go and live like a monk in a monastery for several weeks to practice mindfulness and being quiet and being with myself. The monastery that I went to was in France, and it was called Plum Village, and it got its name from being in a grove of plums. It was a plum tree orchard, and there were persimmon trees everywhere. And I happened to be there during the peak persimmon season, and so I remember walking through the groves as I was just contemplating things and literally, picking these beautifully ripe persimmons off the tree and just
That's
eating them. And
amazing. How
so
cool.
I like persimmons, and then I have really fond memories, and it always brings me back to that season that I had in the monastery. And so
What
I
a
had
neat
to ask
experience.
how you guys got
Yeah,
your
that's
name.
such a neat experience. I joke all the time that I'm an introvert trapped in an extrovert's job. So being able to go to a monastery and be with myself for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, that sounds like the best experience ever.
Yeah, well, if you ever get the opportunity, I highly recommend it.
That's
It's very
great.
transformative. It's
Yeah.
incredibly transformative. Okay, so the Persimmon Group, you guys are a consulting group, and you've mentioned throughout our conversation some of the issues that you tackle within an
Mhm.
organization. Do you guys have like particular industries that you've really leaned into as you've been in existence over the last couple decades, or
Yeah.
like who do you typically serve, and are there certain problems that like are very common that you work with in these organizations?
Yeah, so here's the through thread, right? Is lots of companies build strategy. For some, it's they go play some rounds of golf and then rent a room and, leave with a plan. Others it's more iterative. But lots of companies have a strategy. Many companies their strategies die in execution, right? So what we do help with developing strategy that's clear and crisp and helps people align on what really you're going to go do, not the 20 buzzwords filled into a single sentence that sometimes comes out of those workshops, right? So we do that. But really, the biggest part of what we do is help companies build the organizational system they need to execute with speed, with discipline, to get the throughput, to be able to say at the end of a year or the end of 3 years, this is what we said our strategy was. These were the projects we said we were going to do to achieve it, and we did it. That's what we are doing, right? And so we do that through like advisory consulting, which is what I do, where I go in and work with a company to sort of ascertain what's going on and dig into the bolts of it. Not just like what they do or what their processes or documents are, but like what's your culture? How are you structured? How do you build teams? How do you decide what projects to do? All of those things. So that's a big part. And then we do provide like project managers for like those really high stakes can't fail projects. And we'll do that because we're PMs hiring PMs, right? So we kind of know
Mm,
what we're looking for. In terms of like industries, we're pretty industry agnostic. I will say we do a lot of work with IT and tech teams, whether that's at an energy company or a financial services company or a nonprofit. Their issues tend to stay the same. So we do a lot of work with that, but those aren't the only kinds of projects that we work with. We worked with a big giant pharmaceutical company who built facilities to manufacture vaccines, including, one of the COVID vaccines. And so we were able to go in and help them look at their data and say, how reliably are you actually building these things on time? And what are the different factors that cause one of these projects to work or not work? And so that was like a kind of neat, quantitative analysis project. It's a little different than what I normally do. But yeah, it's a really fun job. You see almost instant impact, and it's cool to go in without a plan in many ways. Like lots of companies will be like, here's our proven 5-step model to achieving greatness. And then they implement it at 20 places that have 20 different needs. That's not us. Everything is really bespoke and tailored to the organization that we're working.
mm. That's really neat. But mostly centered around project management, like project management,
Yeah, and,
execution, and
and
like
maybe how I like to call it is strategy execution because it includes project management, and that's a big bulk of what we do, but also like process improvement, operational efficiency, organizational design, how you design your teams around achieving what you want to achieve. But projects are a big way that you go from just keeping the lights on activity to building a different kind of company a year from now activity. So that is where we focus a lot of our time and
mm,
attention.
interesting. So do you typically work with companies where like it's like, "Oh my gosh, we've had the same goals multiple years in a row and we're just not getting it done, like, and we need some help?" Or
Yeah.
is it more like there's a big shift and like we don't necessarily know how to tackle it, and so like how do we tackle this seismic shift that we need to
It's
make?
it's both those things. So some companies are like, "Oh my god, we are projecting we're going to grow 3x in 18 months and we don't have the people, staff or process in place to scale or to execute on these projects that need to get done." Or like we had in the oil and gas industry, there was some huge new regulations that came through after the pipeline hack where everybody knew, okay, for 4 more years, this is all we're going to be working on. And we don't have the people and we don't have the discipline and we don't have a process to implement. So sometimes it's like, yeah, they're reading the tea leaves and they know they need help in order to deliver, on what they promised or have to deliver on. Other times it's we're not scaling, but we are drowning. We know we could be doing better. We know that when we get together and we build our strategic plan, we say we want to achieve 15 things and we are lucky if we achieve 2 of them,
Mm,
And I've also had clients, one recently who is great, who said, actually, you know what? We're doing fine. When we say we're going to deliver something, we deliver it. The problem is everybody's miserable while it happens. So please help us make this less of a slog, less painful, so we can keep our employees and we can, keep achieving these results without burning people out. That's also a fun kind of project to
Mm,
do.
that's so neat. I love it. I love it. And I love that just like the concept of like making the strategy a reality,
Yeah.
right? Because it's very easy. I think especially because like a lot of people in executive roles tend to be very visionary oriented,
Mhm.
right? And so like communicating that all the way down the line and across time is can be challenging for sure. And so I love that. That's really, really phenomenal.
Think there's an under-leveraged pipeline to CEO positions, which is, I think, and I'm clearly biased, but I think project managers would make really great CEOs if they want to be. Because, okay, you got to think number one, they are used to running cross functional projects. They've probably never worked in a single function of the business, so they understand how all the pieces go together. They understand how to actually mobilize people to get things done, right? They don't live in the world of theory, they live in the world of practice. So if you then combine that with the PM who also happens to have a visionary strategic mind, I'm telling you what, imagine if more C-suites had a person on them, whether they were the CEO or not, who came from that world, how much better companies would get at actually getting things done. I mean, come on. This is like people are sleeping on this.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I know. I totally agree. I remember in my graduate program, one of my favorite classes was a project management class. And, I mean, like the classic, like Thanksgiving dinner with
Yeah.
limited oven space exercise. That like, you have to have dinner ready at this time and, understanding like what are your limiting factors and when do things need to go in the oven based on how many burners you have and how many what oven space you've got and how many people
Yeah.
you're feeding and stuff like that and Gantt charts and all that lovely stuff. It was one of my favorite classes to like piece together all the
It's a
pieces. So I
fun
know that's
job.
like incredibly like a rudimentary, top breaking it down to like Thanksgiving dinner, but it was like still like a project that I
Yeah. Yeah. I
remember
love that.
doing.
I love
So
that.
fun. Okay, so talk to me really quick about like what are you guys after in 2026? Like what are
Yeah.
some of the big focuses, whether it's like a internal initiative, a strategic initiative, a growth initiative? What are you guys after?
Yeah. So, a couple of things. I think we're really thinking about development, especially when you think about what AI is doing to entry level positions across lots of different industries. It's really hard for companies, I think, to make the case to hire someone entry level when AI can do entry level work, right? But that's a short sighted decision because eventually you're going to need people who have that experience. That's actually always been an issue in consulting because people don't pay for a college grad, a recent college grad, to tell them how to run their business. They want experienced people. So we've sort of always had that problem. Now it's doubled. Now our clients are going through it. So it's been really interesting to really think philosophically about how do we build persimmon consultants, right? And so that's been an interesting one. Also related to AI is a huge marketing challenge, which is we've always had a super healthy pipeline of existing recurring clients, referrals from those clients. And for a long time, post pandemic, we had a really healthy sort of online cold lead flow. And, with people searching through AI versus SEO, like the game is changing a little bit about how to get discoverable. And everybody's figuring that out just the same way everybody had to figure out what the pandemic was about. Like it's a whole thing and it's affecting small businesses, I think, especially. And we're 25 employees. So lots of interesting little puzzles to solve behind the scenes, but we are really lucky that we have, we maximize the post-pandemic years in terms of, you know, really achieving great financial foundations, building some great team members. We leaned into providing project managers as sort of a more stable revenue than consulting tends to be. So we're very lucky. We're in a very healthy place, especially to weather a year like this one, which was, just no one knows what's going on economically. Companies want to hang on to cash. Like but we're just really fortunate to be well positioned and still lucky enough to do some incredible, fulfilling work.
Can tell that you're remaining very human in your analysis in terms of recognizing like the power of developing people, right? Like I
Right.
haven't almost every guest I've had recently talks about AI, right? Because it's like the tsunami
Yeah.
that is just like hitting everybody. But rarely is and someone are saying, how do we retain human talent? How do we do like the most human things? But also like I love that perspective of like for humans to be able to do the most human things, like they have to be developed. And so like how do you still create
Yeah.
that without the slog of doing things slowly as like we have in the past. So such good
Yeah.
questions that you're asking yourself.
So, like, I'll give you a quick example. I do a lot of training and facilitating, and there's a certain amount of like, you have to have some deep, rich experience and sort of ways of thinking to develop sessions that truly change people's behavior. And that only comes with experience and probably a natural proclivity to thinking in a more abstract way. So when we have a new employee who's trying to help me build training, but they don't have any of that experience, that's really hard. So what I did is I built a custom GPT that I trained to sort of ask questions like I would ask questions, right? And it's something that I use in my own experience, but I gave our entry level employees access to it. And I said, "This is my brain. If I'm not here, you can ask this brain, and it'll guide you through the kinds of questions I would be asking as you do this work." And so it's been an interesting way to try to start to develop, like actually use AI to develop human skills in a way that can scale if I can't be in the room with all 25 employees at once, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a cool use of generative AI. So fun. I love it. I love it. Well, Sarah, it has been seriously such a rich conversation with you today. It's been so fun, and so I really really appreciate you bringing your not just your experience but your soul and your contemplation to the conversation today. It really has
It
been a
was
joy
so
having you
great.
on the
Thank you
Marketing
so much for
Matrix.
the invitation. This was just a delight.
Good, good. I'm so glad. So, for people that want to follow you, find your newsletter, which we didn't have an opportunity to talk about, so we'll have to have you back and talk more about that. But find you, your newsletter, Persimmon Group. Like, give us the details. How
Yeah,
do people
yeah.
get in
Well,
touch?
the best way to connect with me personally is on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. I do a weekly newsletter called Big Dumb Questions. So, and then the Persimmon Group is just the persimmongroup.com. And you can find out a lot more about what we do there. You can also see some other articles I've written, some of my very brilliant peers have written. And so, yeah, I just always welcome a conversation.
I love it, guys. I'm going to put the links in the episode notes, like Sarah just mentioned, and so you can link directly to those to get in touch with Sarah. And I hope you guys just take on opportunity, like Sarah. One of the things I love the most about you, as I've gotten to know you a little bit, is just you are like no nonsense, but you are also so down to earth, and you are super professional, but you're also approachable.
Thank
So
you.
you're an amazing human being, and it's been a joy getting to know you today.
You too.
Um,
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, guys, so like wherever you're at, wherever you're listening, in your car, the kitchen, or Costco, we know that your time is valuable. So for you to spend some moments with us means the absolute world. Until next time on the Marketing Matrix, see you later.